Yes, the minutes are very, very good. I wonder, I couldn't answer this myself, but on page 2, the abutter, Evelyn Doyle, I checked the spelling on the first name. For some reason, I remember looking at it and I said, that's a strange spelling. So just check that spelling, let's get it right. I mean, it may be right, but it just didn't look right.
Thank you. We'll look at planning to maybe double check that.
Will do.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a little comment. On page 2 and on page 4, it's highlighted as public comment opened, and it's blank. It's my opinion that we should perhaps say no one spoke. Because to me it looks like, did we forget to write something in there? I would at least like the minutes to reflect that no one spoke.
Very good.
Good.
Yes.
Good?
Yes.
Anyone disagree or have another idea?
My only comment is maybe this is standard procedure.
I hadn't seen it before.
Okay.
It very well could be.
Mr. Chair, we would often say no comment was received, so
Yep.
just to clarify that. We can add that
Anything along those lines is fine with me. I just think something should be there. It looks like something was missed. That's my 2 cents. Anyone else? Could I have a motion, please?
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Is there a second?
Mr. Frank, second?
Mr. Frank, thank you, Mr. Frank. Any other discussion on those? A couple editorials there, maybe check the spelling. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. Moving along, Chairman's report. Happy New Year. I don't have anything else right now at this time. Thank you. Committee reports. Moving along, Ordinance Review Committee, Mr. Walsh.
Yes, we've just conducted a meeting of the Ordinance Review Committee, and 2 topics. One is our ongoing discussion on a butter notification, and we're looking for staff to bring us back some additional recommendations. And then an introduction by Mr. Poirier on the topic, the next topic we're digging into, which is to deal with on-street and off-street parking ordinances. Recommendations that have been passed to the committee by the town council are up for review. That's going to take a few meetings.
I believe we're hoping to maybe meet again. Is that just to plant the seed out there that we may be having another workshop this month?
That sounds like we will be having one on, was it the 27th, Damon?
tentatively. The
Okay.
board would like to schedule that. We can do that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Moving along, the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee, Mr. Frank.
And we just met as well. We had 2 topics, one of which we did not get to, had to do with zoning, and we're going to reschedule that. And the one we did deal with is a contract zone for Aaron Flett. And the contract itself needs some minor or fairly minor revisions and tweaking, and then we're going to review it again at this to-be-scheduled future meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frank. Any other comments from the board? Thank you. Moving along, Administrative Review Report. May Metal, I'm looking towards the planning department.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So, yep, Maine Metal was approved for construction of a 9,000 square foot commercial building at 625 Main Street. They got that approval on December 11th. And we've received an additional application for 34 County Road for mixed-use development. The review has not been scheduled at this time, but we'll be sending out public notice when it is.
Thank you very much. Anything from the board? Any questions? Thank you. Moving along, item 1. Item 1 this evening is discussion, contract zone, Nick Triano, Gorham Fairways contract zone. A request to create a contract zone on 170 plus or minus acres of the former Gorham Country Club to allow a limited number of single-family homes as part of a larger mixed-use residential and commercial development on McClellan Road. Zone South Gorham Crossroads, SG 8, Lot 41, and Map 7, Lot 18, Lot 6, Lot 7, and Lot 8. The applicant is represented by Dan Riley, PE of Sebago Techniques. Anyone from planning would like to kick this off?
Sure, good evening, Mr. Chairman. So, as the committee is well versed now, contract zones, the planning board gives a recommendation to the council on a proposed contract zone language. What I will say a little bit different about this one is this one has a very aggressive schedule to move this forward. So what we're looking to do this evening is review the proposed language. This proposed language would then go to a council workshop to be held later this month, so the council reviews the language prior to the planning board's public hearing on this contract zone language, just so the council can review it. Because what the council did not want to have is the planning board to hold a public hearing, they go to the council, and the council make drastic changes to the contract zone, because that would require it to come back. So what council wants to do is to look at the planning board's language that's being proposed for a public hearing, hopefully next month before that meeting. So just kind of start that thought with the planning board today, that we want to get any big changes that you want in this contract zone done tonight, and then sent to the council as part of a workshop to be held later this month. And with that, answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Poirier. Anyone from the board with Mr. Poirier? All righty. You have the floor, Mr. Riley.
Can I go first? All right. So I'm Nick Triano with Triano Properties, and so we started presenting to you guys a while back with the Lot 6 Residences at Gorham Country Club project. That project's been tweaked several times since, and we've come back with smaller projects as well, Fairway Commons. We now have made a bigger project to try to make efforts to get the water and sewer to this area. So we realize now that the town doesn't have the funds to do so, and we have to, as the developer, bring the funds to the whole 180-acre parcel. Our plan is, sitting back and kind of waiting to see what the town could do. There wasn't a lot in the course of the last year. We decided that it is best for us to kind of take the lead and get the water and sewer to this area. So we have since taken all, I believe it's 6 parcels of the Gorham Country Club. We have control of all of it. Our look is to be able to sell these house lots to be able to pay for the municipal water and sewer. There's no way else to do it, being able to sell lots without us actually building them. So we thought that originally the townhouses were the way to go, but in order to do the townhouses, we would actually have to fulfill internally building all these units and selling them. Where with the single-family dwelling units, they're the same size footprint houses, they're the same thing, nothing's different. It's actually less single-family houses than it is townhouses, so it's less of a burden on single-family houses. The plan was to be able to sell the lots instead of having to sell the houses. So it would actually allow the lots to be sold to individuals to come in and build one house or two houses, or a developer to come in and build 3. So it would actually slow down development in other areas of the town and bring them to us, because they're using our lots to build. So it's essentially double dipping, so the town's not getting hit with people building everywhere all at once. So with that being said, our plan was to kind of fast track everything, be transparent, not ask for a lot. We're asking for, I believe it's 8% single-family dwelling units. We're asking for, of total density, we're asking for a change of the layout, so it's not all gridded throughout. And I believe that are the 2 major changes. And I'll turn it over to Dan Riley from Sebago from the rest.
Thank you. I'm Dan Riley. I'm an engineer with Sebago Technics, and after Nick's introduction, I'd like to walk through what the proposed development is, talk a little bit about the area that's occupied and the requests that are before you. So if you give me a moment, I will plug in here and hopefully be able to put this on screen for you. Do I use which plug? Sorry, there's Doug's here, so hopefully this is the right one. Here we go. Thank you. So as Nick discussed, we're here tonight to talk to about the Fairway Commons contract zone. Nick outlined a little bit the proposal and what the reasoning behind it. What I would like to do is spend a little bit of time talking about what the actual proposed provisions in the contract zone language are, talk about the development program and the schematic master plan that we put together to inform that, the language of that contract zone, and then summarize some of the areas that we looked at that we believe the project falls in conformance with the provisions of the comprehensive plan that would apply to the area. The project, as Nick said, occupies about 155 acres of the former Gorham Country Club project site. The board has seen and reviewed last summer a master plan for the area identified on the screen here as map 7 lot 18. The master plan includes that parcel. It includes the area adjacent to it to the west, and those two lots on the north side of McCullen Road occupy about 55 acres and roughly 100 acres to the south with the remaining property. The hatched area on the screen you see there is the excuse me, the Fairway Commons project that was reviewed and approved by the planning board last summer. That is a multifamily residential project that's hopefully going to be getting under construction here soon. So there are really three provisions at the root of what the contract zone language is seeking here. One is to allow single-family or duplex residential units with the number of those units capped at no more than 8% of the master plan's full build-out of multifamily units. As part of that, and some discussion with the city council, the zoning language seeks to establish a minimum and maximum lot size for those single-family residential properties. And after discussion with the council, it's proposed as a 5,000 square foot minimum and a 10,000 square foot maximum lot size for the single-family residential component. And those were selected, consistent with the kind of the closest nearby residential zone, the South Gorham Commercial District, and with the maximum set to try to maintain consistency with the high-density goals that the South Gorham Crossroads District seeks. And then the third provision of that is really an amendment to the performance standards within the South Gorham Crossroads District. As you recall, when we reviewed the Gorham Fairways, the Residences at Gorham project, there's a maximum block length provision. The South Gorham Crossroads District was envisioned and laid out as a fairly traditional sort of uniform block pattern, and that works pretty well on many areas of the site, like we talked about in the master plan. But when we start looking at some of the areas, particularly on the south side of the site and the terrain and some of the restrictions on that, trying to provide that block length runs into some difficulties while also trying to stay consistent with the lay of the land. So what we're requesting, the current zoning ordinance has a provision you see on the left there, where no block shall have a perimeter of more than 1,600 linear feet. The planning board can grant a waiver to reduce the block perimeter length in accordance with provisions of the ordinance, and we're just simply asking that the language be amended to also allow the planning board to increase or waive the maximum perimeter standard under certain conditions, and specifically provided that such a waiver would result in a site design that's responsive to the natural terrain and that enhances the open space and pedestrian connectivity of the site, which are two important pieces of the comprehensive plan and the zoning district's current language. So anytime a contract zone is proposed, as you know, that there has to be a public benefit associated, or typically there's a public benefit associated with a contract zone that's also paired with compliance with the underlying comprehensive plan. And the public benefit that we discussed with the council and is presented in our application is the extension of public water and sewer to the site. That infrastructure support will not only benefit this project, but the surrounding area, addressing some long-term well issues and increasing value for properties that can connect to that. The compliance with the conservative plan is spoken to directly. The comprehensive plan in the infrastructure goals section provides several goals for the community that include providing appropriate infrastructure to support the development in those areas of the community where growth is desired or designated growth areas, which we're in. It calls for the use of the availability of public water and sewer as a tool in managing the development pattern of the town to direct most new developments to the designated growth areas. The lack of water and sewer is really the only impediment toward sort of achieving the high density that the Crossroads District calls for. It just simply can't be supported without that infrastructure. And in the comprehensive plan's infrastructure goals section, it does say the town should continue to use tax increment financing and impact fees as a way to facilitate the extension of the public water and sewer systems. So although this isn't specifically an impact fee or in tax increment financing system, we think the contract zone is another mechanism that falls in line with that idea of being able to manage the development in the growth areas through the extension of public water and sewer, and the town supporting that. And we think the benefit to it is there's no cost to the town to do that under the proposal that we have in front of you. So what really is the issue on the screen there, and the board's familiar with this, I think, is that there is a $6 or $8 million infrastructure bill related to extending public water and sewer to the site. The nearest public sewer in Gorham is at Hutchinson Road to the north of the site. That's over 11,000 feet distant from the project site. And water is somewhere between 6,500 and 9,500 feet from the site, depending on which direction the water is extended from the water district's existing system. And as Nick alluded to, the single-family residential component with the limitations that are proposed are intended to directly support the ability to build that infrastructure, not only from being able to offset the cost of that through the sale of the lots, but the timing of that sale and the cash outlay that the developer benefits from with the single-family lots based on other uses is a really important component. It allows the developer to spend the money to bring the infrastructure to the site. They can construct a roadway and be able to start recouping some of the value of that infrastructure by selling the lots compared to also having to outlay the investment in actually constructing the building. So there's a timing aspect to it that is an important piece of this that I think Nick talked to and can speak in more detail to if necessary. So to talk a little bit about the program and plan that we prepared in coming to development of what we're asking for in these provisions is shown up on the screen here, which is a copy of the plan here. So what's currently proposed in front of you is a mixed-use development. It's currently envisioned with a program of 824 multifamily units in a combination of apartments, townhouses, and mixed-use commercial and residential buildings with commercial on the ground floor and apartment residential above. There's a component in the contract zone for 64 residential single-family residential properties, and that's derived by being 8% of that multifamily unit count. There's a commercial component between 60 and 76,000 square feet of commercial space as we've laid the plan out. The plan also includes and envisions a minimum of about 20 acres of conservation land, primarily around the Stroudwater River and in the south portion of the site, and the whole project tied together through a pattern of open space and trails that will be open to the public. And I think to maybe talk through and give some context to the layout of the plan here, excuse me, we're frozen. We'll talk from here. Oh, there we go. I'll talk from the plan here. So in the development plan you see before you, to talk about the plans, the different buildings located here are color-coded to identify some of the program areas. The dark blue buildings here and in this portion of the site are your commercial buildings and your mixed-use commercial buildings, which would be commercial uses on the ground floor with residential units above. You'll recall from last summer's discussion on the master plan for the residents at Gorham Country Club that we had developed a plan that would include that mixed-use component at this area of the site. Similar component is proposed on the south side of the site over in this area. So the blue is your commercial and your mixed-use commercial and residential component of the program. The orange shaded structures are apartment buildings. And again, the design is familiar here, was the approved master plan area for the residents at Gorham Country Club. Similar buildings with garages are proposed for the south side of the property in the center of the site here. And I'll talk a little bit more about why these are located where they are in a minute. The rust-colored buildings are your multifamily residential component. Townhouse-styled units using a design very similar to the Fairway Commons project that was approved last fall would be located in this area, and then the rectangular buildings here represent a traditional multi-story condominium building with units on multiple floors. The blue, light blue shaded areas that give the appearance of a single-family lot are what we're proposing as work-live units, and this is a concept that the planning staff asked us to consider and build in the program. This is envisioned as a residential scale building that would include a commercial space and a residential space in a single structure or in an accessory structure on the same lot. And the idea would be, it would be a space, for example, for something like a professional office, say a chiropractor might have an office on a ground floor and a commercial unit and a residential unit above. That could be for the proprietor of the business, but it could also be a separate residential unit over time. It was identified as the staff as a need in the community, as sort of an incubator space and a space for small businesses or owner-occupied businesses to be able to share a commercial space in a unit within one building. Those would also be sort of identified, we would see on the plan with a different maybe parking arrangement in front of the house where you might have head-in on-street parking sort of in front of that building to allow visitors to whatever that might be. Like I said, an example might be a chiropractor's office, hairdresser, could be a daycare type facility on the ground floor with a residence above. But that was a component that the staff thought was a missing component in Gorham and asked if we could include in the site. So we've incorporated that schematically here in the light blue. The yellow would be the single-family residential component. And like I said, through talking with staff and with the council, we understood that the scale of that development should be limited, that the staff was supportive of, or could be supportive of a single-family residential component as part of a larger planned development. And the contract zone would be the mechanism for that, so that it can be approved on a site-specific basis rather than globally across the rest of the zone. So as we started looking at that component and working out the program, we started to evaluate the shape of the land and the requirements of the contract zone and the goals of the South Gorham Crossroads District. And as we talked in the past, that led us to evaluating some of the site. On the screen there is a site constraints plan or site analysis plan that we used to start laying out how we could fit this program sort of comprehensively on the site while also paying attention to a number of the terrain features. Anyone who's been out to the site knows it's a beautiful terrain, it's a beautiful piece of land, but there are some challenges to it. There are some steep sloped areas, there are some water features and natural resources that need to be worked into. And so as we started looking at those areas that would be either difficult and expensive to develop and that we would want to avoid, we also looked at it from the standpoint of where could we place these components on the site in a way that was a little more harmonious with the terrain so that the roadways followed the contours as more than crossing over them. And as we did that, trying to lay that out in a strict accordance to the block standard became a little bit problematic. There are areas of the site, particularly on the north side, where the slope is relatively uniform and it's sort of conducive to that traditional lot layout, but there are certainly areas to the west and on the south side where we have relatively steep terrain. And trying to use that sort of traditional village gridded layout pattern really becomes difficult in terms of the amount of earthwork that you would have to undertake to support the parking and the development of that. And so the concept here was to try to provide, a dense core of your commercial and your mixed use and your higher density residential, and then surround that on the periphery with reducing density. And so we've located the single family residential sort of on the periphery of that, sort of taking into account some of the patterns that are traditionally been seen in Gorham and some of the other village areas. I'll skip ahead here. My computer seems to be locked up. But what the overview, when you overlay that site analysis and you start laying in some of the roads and laying out the different programmatic elements to try and follow the terrain, what that led to was a conclusion that trying to provide enough roadways to meet the standard of the block length can be achieved in some areas, particularly the area that you've already reviewed in terms of the master plan, and this area is pretty conducive to that 1,600 linear foot limit. Other areas of the site, particularly the roadway following the contours through the project here and here, are a little bit more difficult. And that trying to force the length of road to a shorter block length kind of drives roads into places that aren't really conducive based on the terrain of the land. And so our reasoning behind this was simply that we want to ask for a provision in the contract zone that gives the planning board some ability to evaluate the design, to make a conclusion that the layout that may be a longer block length provides a more aesthetically pleasing site, it provides better connectivity, and works with the lay of the land. Sort of the final piece of this that I wanted to talk a little bit about is the open space component. This area down in the corner here, shaded dark green around the Stroudwater River. It includes all the areas adjacent to the river that are in the shoreland zone and in the floodplain, and all the areas to the south of it. Are roughly about 20 acres, as we show here, is intended to be conveyed to either the town or a third party as conservation land. So that's what the dark green shading here is. The white dotted lines are a conceptual layout of where we see a network of trails that would be open to the public through some of the open space that would be owned by the development, but would be open space that's available to the public. We did have feedback and know that the site's been used for sledding. It's been used for a lot of uses by people over the years. And so if you look at the plan with some of the overlay of some of the aerial photos, many of those open fairway areas that are retained here and are going to be dedicated in some open space that will be available to the public that can be used for the uses that they've been used for in the past. Supporting that use, we are planning, as part of the planning board's review, if the contract zone is approved and moves through its process, is to provide parking on street that's dedicated for the use that the public can use to access some of that open space. We've highlighted some of that here, but I think you can kind of expect that anywhere where the trail network ultimately crosses or meets a roadway would be an opportunity that we're certainly looking as we develop the plan further to provide parking and access so that open space can be accessible to the public. There will certainly be some private open space, particularly around the townhouse style units where there'll be some amenity space and things that for the individual unit owners. But in general, the open space on the site for the areas that are within the contract zone are anticipated to be publicly available and connected by a trail network as sort of is envisioned in the South Gorham's district. In the packet, I won't walk through it. I have some slides for it, but like I said, there it comes. My computer's not behaving. We think that the plan, and we outlined in the application, and I think Carol summarized as well, some areas where the contract zone provisions of the comprehensive plan that the contract zone follows along with. A few of those are summarized here at the end of my slides, and I'd like to walk through those just briefly here, if this behaves. So a couple of the areas that are outlined in your packet. In the community goals section in particular, I'll leave that up on the screen there, but what the areas that we keyed in on in the comprehensive plan is that Gorham offers a variety of lifestyles and living environments. The two villages, South Gorham and the other rural neighborhoods, offer a range of types of housing from single-family homes to apartments and condominiums. On the fringes of the villages, more typical suburban-style subdivisions provide housing for families and others who want some space. So that, in that community goal section, the proposed single-family development and where we place it, I think, reflects what the comprehensive plan identifies as an existing village pattern in the community, and that's kind of being applied to the new zoning crossroads district, specifically trying to create some dense, more commercial and denser residential neighborhoods with a little bit less density as you move away from the fringes. And that's sort of what's guided the single-family residential where it is. In addition, the areas of the site on those edges coincidentally happens to be some of the steeper portions of the site. And those areas we felt were more amenable to a single-family residential development where you can fit the smaller structures into the terrain somewhat easier than you can the larger multifamily developments and really with where their parking is. And so that's really informed where those have laid on the site, and we think that's consistent with the community goals in the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan also goes on to say the town's land use regulations should continue to allow for the construction of both single-family and multifamily housing in a variety of locations at densities that are appropriate for the type of housing and the location. The town should support the development of housing of all types to meet the community's growing older population. So we think that the single-family residential fits into that as well. We have intentionally kept the lot sizes small so that the density that is provided here remains in line with the comprehensive plan's goals for this area. And specifically, the comprehensive plan calls for a range of densities from 5 to 15 units per net acre. Our project, as we've laid it out here, is at about 7 units per gross acre. So if we just take the 20 acres of conservation land and apply the single-family residential and the multifamily residential to all of that remaining land, we're at about 7 units per acre. That's not a full net residential calculation. That doesn't take out areas of the site that you typically would, including wetlands, water bodies, steep slopes, all the things that would typically go into a net residential calculation. But we think that on a gross basis, being sort of in the middle of the range that the comprehensive plan calls for, supports the idea of a smaller lot, single-family residential development in this area. Finally, the other areas that I just wanted to kind of highlight from the comprehensive plan, all of the arrows you see on the plan there really are items that are in one aspect of the plan or not. The idea of the infrastructure extension that would be performed as part of the contract zone that meets the infrastructural goals of the comprehensive plan, where it looks to use infrastructure to guide the development to the growth areas, removes the impediment to the high density that the district calls for but hasn't yet seen because of the limitations of utility infrastructure. The project as it's laid out and in the proposed zone would meet the density residential targets. Like I said, the comprehensive plan looks for 5 to 15 units per net acre, and we're already at 7% from a gross acre density. So we think the proposal with the single-family residential component meets that. The comprehensive plan calls for compact village development. I think we've done that where we've placed that sort of compact development in the areas of the site that can best support it without excessive earthwork and moving and really impacting what the essence of the property is and the value that it's had over the years. The comprehensive plan calls for a variety of housing types. The full range of housing is proposed here with the single-family residential really being limited in scope and size so that we meet the density requirements. And finally, the comprehensive plan and the South Gorham Crossroads zoning standards look for open space and recreational trails. And I think we've been able to do that in a way that responds to the terrain on the site. The trail network and the open space will be open to the public, connected to the conservation land on the south side of the site, and with public parking provided to support it. So that's our proposal. A little bit of background on how we arrived at it. And as we talked about, our goal here tonight really is to hear your comments on it, try to work through whatever may need to be worked through with the ultimate goal of trying to get to a point where we can have a public hearing, hopefully, if you're comfortable with the proposal, as early as February. And with that, I'd pause and take any questions you might have.
Members of the board?
Mr. Chair?
Please.
Dan, I have a number of questions, but, just my compliments, very good presentation, quite a project.
It is.
Yeah, and I'm, thrilled to see that if it results in getting water and sewer down to South Gorham, it's a good outcome. But number of questions. You've outlined some of the benefits to the town. I guess maybe the gorilla in the corner. Does the Gorham connector play into this or not? I mean, originally, the plan would be to wrap around the north side of it. If that project does not move forward, does that impact this at all? No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
All right. You have mentioned the 64 single-family units in an 8% cap. Where did the 8% come from?
We came with to that number by looking at what the development program for the multifamily was and what the expected cost implication of the utilities were. And we wanted to keep it low, understanding that, that's the idea here is to keep the density high. So we wanted to keep them small. We needed to keep the number low. About 64 units is what the applicant has determined is sort of necessary based on the infrastructure. As it's laid out now, that works out to about 8% of what we think the site can support from a multi-family residential project. So we sort of worked into that number, but it seemed like a reasonable number that we could present to the council with, understanding that we wanted to keep the number limited. We needed to provide a cap to that.
Okay, so that leads me right into, would this be subject to the growth ordinance? I guess I'm looking over towards Tom as well as you.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Isn't there something on the growth ordinance with the multi-use with commercial and residential?
There is an exemption for mixed-use development. So if the applicant was looking to do that as part of this development, we've had discussions, one of the commercial areas would have to go forward with the first phase. What that looks like is a pad site probably for a commercial development, but it has to go part of phase one to get the exemption under the
Right,
growth
I
ordinance.
remember the discussion on that. But where now, if this project was to move forward with single-family residences, they would be subject to the growth ordinance?
Correct. So again, if he did a commercial component as part of the development, the single families are exempt from the growth ordinance.
So that, all right, so that leads me to, I had a question about the location of your multi-use or your commercial, the blue, where it backs into the single-family residential. Is that the purpose of that, putting those back-to-back? So that would be one phase?
Yeah, there were two purposes to that. One is that. The other is there's also a terrain component to that as well, because again, that's an area of the site that sort of lends itself to a smaller scale structure without as much parking as a larger commercial development would be. So it fit from both standpoints. It kind of acts as a bit of a transition from the higher density commercial residential to a more residential. It was based on some terrain implications and how we would look to construct that, but it also would be considered a commercial piece of it. And I think to clarify, in the proposal related to the growth ordinance, we're not requesting any revisions to the growth ordinance, but we would certainly apply the growth ordinance with any existing exemptions that are allowable under it as it's written. So we're not asking for any changes to that ordinance, but we don't want to rule out taking advantage of the exemptions that exist within it, if
Okay.
that's clear.
All right, two more questions, and I'll pass it over to my peers. When looking at this, will these be private streets, or will you be looking to make these to be public streets accepted by, if accepted by the town?
Well, we initially looked at it and expected them to be private. In some staff review comments, or in some of the staff meetings, it was suggested that some of the roads, particularly the loop road through here, could potentially be looked at by the town as something that was valuable and accepted. So any street acceptance or proposal to make them street acceptance, I think, would be left to when we come forward to you with a master plan and then through the site plan process to try to identify which one of those might be public and might be private. We haven't really determined that yet, but in our recent staff meeting in December, some of the town staff suggested that at a minimum, this loop road connecting through the project site should be considered as potentially being public because of the function that it serves.
Yeah, that makes sense. And lastly, when looking at the language, the proposed language for the contract zone, I was looking to see, I was looking for time limits on it. Either, some, where the project would start, or a limit of how long it would take, and, just looking for some timing language in the contract zone.
I don't think there's any needed. I think we put one provision in there that the utility or the sewer and water needs to be done as part of phase one. So I think that as long as that's done as part of phase one for the utility extensions, how long it takes this site to build up or be completed, I think that's for the market kind of to decide. But I think getting the utilities there is part of phase one.
I guess it would be mostly, Tom, on the start. And if you've already pegged the start to be, the first thing that has to happen is get the water and sewer in there, phase one. And just to refresh my memory, the phase one is the part there on the north side of McClellan, correct?
Well,
Well, I know you have the townhouses already.
Well, in the master plan, for when we were only looking at this property, that would be the first phase. But I think with the revised plan, the single-family road or the access for the single-family would be part of that first phase.
Okay.
Under the revised scheme. And I think that could also be, we still need to, once we know whether or not this use is going to be allowed, we still have to come back through in the whole master plan process with the planning board to work out some more of those details in the design. But under the contract zone as it's proposed, the utility infrastructure would come to the site, and then the applicant certainly intends to develop the roadways to support the single-family lots, be able to sell those lots, and then pursue the other components of it that they'll build themselves. And so that's how the layout's envisioned. So exactly what the phasing and timing of it is, I don't know, but certainly the single-family, we would look to have that as part of that first phase.
Yeah, so just lastly, it would be helpful to see that phasing when you get that done.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Colonel, please.
Yeah, sure. I'd just like to kind of follow up on some of that. I appreciate the comprehensive review you gave us, and I do also the fact that we're going to get public sewer and water to the site, which is something that we talked about originally. So again, I appreciate those efforts as well. I think that's a benefit to the town. I do want to state just publicly for the record that this is, if this gets approved, it goes back to the town council. We're talking about the contract zone. As you indicated, any site plan has to come back to the planning board. So for the public, what you see here is not the approved plan. This is a discussion and concept so we can get the contract zone approved. And then the plan actually has to come back and we go into much more detail on, the buildings and the phasing and the rest of it. But I just want to be clear to the public that whatever happens tonight, this isn't the last time it's seen. It has to come back and we have to go through a very detailed site plan review and approval process. So the intent of the commercial spaces, are those to really service the residents of these sites, or are they going to be intent to be open to the rest of the public, where they're usable by others in Gorham that could come and access the commercial spaces?
Oh, they're fully commercial spaces intended for anyone in the public who wants to come use them. It's the only way they can be really viable.
Okay, I'm just thinking like access and road, I mean, that, obviously, that's for discussions for further reviews,
and
but.
I would talk to that too, because it is important for the public to understand too, is that there are some limitations in the zoning that limits the number of curb cuts that
Right.
we can have on the public road. The standards in the zone line also want to keep landscaping between the existing roads and the buildings, so that's why the parking is sort of turned inwards, and it's why the access points are somewhat limited, because those are all trying to be responsive to what the underlying zoning calls for in this district.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, fully commercial spaces, whatever, is going to be viable in those
Great.
spaces.
And Mr. Walsh mentioned, he asked about the growth ordinance and the possible exemptions. So if they sell off the single-family lots, how does that impact the growth ordinance and the exemptions to it? Because they're no longer building the properties, they've sold off the lots. So how does the growth ordinance then apply to the zone?
So the growth permit runs with the lot. So in the case, I mean, it's hard to know, but so if he comes forward with just single-family houses, the growth ordinance comes into effect and you only get 10 permits per year if you don't do any mixed use. If he comes forward with that first phase with a component of commercial along with the residential, then the single-family house lots as part of that first phase become exempt from the growth ordinance.
All of them,
All of them.
even if he sells them off? So you could have 61, you could have 61.
Because it's the development, it's the mixed-use development that we're looking at targeting that.
Right, so you could have 60 lots sold off to 60 independent contractors who would all be building their houses at the exact same time.
Yes. Is it likely? No.
It's likely not, but that, I just, I want to realm of the possible.
Well, that will be dependent upon them getting the infrastructure in.
Of
for
course,
that.
all of that, yes. I just, as we talk about, the growth ordinance is there for a reason, and now I'm not blaming the developer for using the assets that they're, but I want to understand it from a town perspective.
If it was one building with 60 units and it was a mixed-use development, you would get the same exemption. So lots or units, they're exempt.
Doesn't matter.
I'd like to add to it too, to be honest. So be mindful that 60 house lots, like I said, you're going to have developers from other areas that would be developing in Gorham anyway, coming and buying from us, versus if we don't do this, we're going to have to do these townhouses, and instead of 60, it'd be like 160. It takes 160 townhouses to produce the same revenue that 60 houses do. And we don't need a contract zone for that. We can come back to you guys next month and start doing that. And that's the whole thing. We're trying to work with the town. So 64 is a lot better than 164.
I'm supportive of the single family and all the rest of it. I just want to know what the impact is.
Yeah.
And if we're gonna restrict growth, if the growth, I want to understand what the growth ordinance says, and that was the why I asked the question. But I appreciate the follow up. So to his point, if they had just kept those, like didn't have any single family homes, they wouldn't have any restrictions on multifamily going in there because with the same exception.
Correct. If you remember the discussion, the last time was the apartment units and then having a commercial building on the north side. We had that the same discussion.
Yeah, we did. Yep. Okay.
Ms. Nichols, did I see you?
Yeah.
No pressure.
I just had a question, well, two questions, really. The light blue that is commercial, could you explain to me what that is, what that looks like again?
Sure. So we identified those on these plans as, I'm making sure I got the nomenclature right. As a live-work mixed-use building. And the concept for that was the planning staff came with, and the idea would be is that it would be either a single structure or a structure with an accessory building or attached or unattached, that would allow for a commercial unit and a residential unit in a single structure. But the scale of that and all of the lots that you see there are still adhering to the minimum and maximum lot size that we're proposing for a single family. So we haven't designed those buildings yet, so whether they would look like a single family building or they would look like a more commercial building. But the idea would be they'd be a single structure that were set up and designed intentionally to be able to allow for a commercial use, say on the ground floor in a portion of that structure with a residential unit attached in the same structure. And like I said, the example might be, well, the example is if you've ever been to a lot of, say, professional offices in some other communities that have been developed into very large, older buildings, where you could have a doctor, maybe not a doctor or a dentist, but say a chiropractor or a daycare or some other commercial enterprise, say on the ground level with parking to support it, and have a unit integral in the same structure shared within it, but at a more scale more closely aligned with a residential structure is how that's envisioned to be. We have to work through a little bit exactly what that looks like and how that comes through when we come to the master plan. But again, that was an idea and a concept that was identified by the staff as a need for the city. It could be an incubator space for a small business that can operate until they're large enough and successful enough to move into one of the other commercial units. It could be a small business, a hairdresser. I think daycares would fit into that type of development. Certainly professional offices or a small professional office, small lawyer's office could operate out of a building like that, it's a kind of a sole proprietor type operation. What we don't want it to include are things that would require outdoor storage, like say a plumber's shop that had a lot of outdoor equipment. That wouldn't be part of that, but it would be more of an operation that could be self-contained without outside storage, that could exist and operate in a single building.
Then with that, within the lot size, they are expected to take care of their own parking. So it's not going to be on-street parking there, along there, but within that lot size, if it's a daycare, they don't have many cars have to be there generally in the morning, in the afternoon. So they figure that out within the size of that lot.
Well, I don't think that's been determined. I know the standards of the South Gorham Crossroads District that wouldn't be changed by this, encourage the use of on-street parking. So any of the streets and any of the rest of this development can be used for on-street parking. I think what we had envisioned would be potentially, and again, this would be something we would work out with you when we come through the master planning process that the zoning requires. I think for some of those uses, that some on-street parking maybe head in front of some of those buildings might be appropriate, because it does identify it as a mixed-use building. It's in line with what the rest of the standards of the district look for to have parking adjacent to commercial uses, so you don't have to cross drive lines. So I think that might be one of the things that sort of differentiates this as a mixed-use area compared to a strictly single-family, might be the arrangement of the on-street parking in front of it. Instead of parallel parking you might have on a residential street, you may have a couple of head-in spaces on the street that look like parking spaces and tell you that you're arriving at a commercial or commercial or mixed-use building. So that's kind of how we see that at this point.
Okay, and then my other question is, so one of the asks are to have the single lots, be able to sell off those single lots as you're part of phase one so that you have the funds to bring in the infrastructure, the water, sewer lines. So you're going to do, you've already identified the two on the south side, but you'll also have to have an access road to that north side selling off those lots as well? Or are you just staying south to begin with?
I think to begin with, it would be to the south.
Okay.
You couldn't really viably develop that as part of a first phase. There's just far too much road to be constructed.
That was really what I was kind of wondering.
Yeah, the early phase residential, you're correct, wouldn't necessarily include, although they could include all of them. I think from just a development that makes sense, you'd be looking at the lots on the south side of the project first, And then these would probably be developed in a later phase, once some of the infrastructure for the multifamily here is available to it, because like I said, it wouldn't make sense to build all of that roadway just to get to those single-family residences. That wouldn't make economic sense.
All right, thank you.
Colonel,
I just had a question for the town. I know that, we're encouraging South Gorham, the growth in South Gorham, high density, et cetera. I think I've seen language, kind of a two-village center kind of structure where you'd encourage another village center in South Gorham. There aren't a lot of public parks in South Gorham. So something like this size, and I know we've talked about the 20 acres and so forth, but does the town get involved at some point and say, hey, we need a public park in this area? Or is there planning for that? Should that be in consider? I mean, I know we'll talk about public space when we get into the site plans, but how does the town address that?
So I think we addressed that as part of the master plan process, but staff has already started to have that discussion with the applicant, and that's why in his presentation, Mr. Riley identified that open space on the other side of the river being something the town would like to utilize, and I think the council also addressed it a little bit when they were talking about the ski hills and preserving some of that open space. So I think that's what we've already been having the discussion about, utilizing possibly the town getting that open space, whether there's a conservation easement to Presumpscot Regional Land Trust or another regional land trust associated with that. I mean, it's still early on, but I think as we play out the master plan process, that will get cleared up, and then.
So it is being discussed.
Correct.
Thanks.
Ms. Nichols, please.
I had one other question I neglected to ask. So if you've got roughly 64 single-family lots, and if you had 60 builders, are those builders going to have guidelines of what those houses should look like? Is there going to be some consistency with it? Or is that coming at the next phase?
Yeah.
One HOA, you think, for the whole space, or two separate, or what's the vision there? Yep.
And that's not to say, too, that we don't build.
Mr. Triano, please go to the Thank you.
So for starters, it's not to say that we don't build some of the single family ourselves, right? So if the economy drops and we need to do some of it to offset, because there's a lack of developers in the area, probably not the case, but it might happen. We might, but odds are the residential will have its own HOA docs, because there's 3 building materials, there's certain aspects that need to be done to meet the code that we have to fit, but they have to fit it as well. And then the commercial component's a little different. We'll probably be building all those buildings ourselves. So, and the commercial piece is a little bit different, where they have their own parameters as well, the dark blue buildings. So those will be a little bit more complex designs.
I would just add to that, I think typically of most sort of phased developments, and some examples in town that we've worked on, say like the Pheasant Knoll project on the other side of town, that is actually a series of about 7 different condominium associations. Essentially usually there's a master association that has certain responsibilities, and then there are sub-associations within that are more specific to each phase. And so it's generally set up that way, and as Nick alluded to, that's really to try to address correctly the requirements for the different types of development that are in there, because the parameters around an association for a single family are going to be somewhat different from an apartment, which you don't own, so there's no kind of ownership for that. So like the master agreement would typically address sort of all of the open space around the apartments, and then separate, somewhat different documents would apply to, say, the single-family development and the townhouse development, just because the needs and responsibilities that go with that are different depending on the construction type. So it's not uncommon to have sort of a layered set of association documents to address something like that has very different programmatic components.
Anyone else? I have Mr. Frank, all yours.
Thank you. Excuse me again. When you were answering Mrs. Nichols' question about the completely enclosed for the commercial, is that true for all the commercial buildings that you're proposing?
Enclosed in terms of,
You know, outside storage type stuff, like the plumber thing?
I think for any of the commercial development, the, whatever restrictions are in the current zoning would apply to those developments. We're not looking, that's not, those other components are being proposed, you know, sort of completely within what's allowed under the current zoning without any request for modification or any changes to that. So any other provisions of the underlying zone would apply to the commercial spaces, the mixed-use buildings, the apartments.
Yeah, the ones that you pointed to first on the far east end, those are the ones that I was thinking about, because no, those are the ones those are the ones I was focusing on, because it seemed like Barbara you were talking to the three of them on that side.
Yeah, and I think that the ordinance has some clear requirements. I have to read what this zone particularly says about outdoor storage, but whatever is in that district now related to exterior storage would be adhered to with this, because we're not looking for any modifications or revisions to any of those parameters. The only requests really are the use to allow single family with some space restrictions and a cap on the number, and then the one provision related to the block length. Any other development standards would be as they're written in the current zoning ordinance.
So if the existing ordinance did permit some form of outdoor storage, would you consider restricting or eliminating the outdoor storage for certain of your commercial buildings?
The way we look at it is we're trying to create a community. So we want everything to be clean and presentable, right? So we don't want trailers backing into people's houses when there's young kids walking through on sidewalks. We don't want cars left up on jacks at a mechanic shop. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just not great for a community feel. Especially when you guys already have the industrial park. There's plenty of space for that. There's plenty of space in other towns for it. There's plenty of spaces in Gorham for it. We need to focus more on the housing aspect and giving the people places to live and just kind of keeping a clean, safe environment for everyone. So that's the reason why we're focused on that, not so much because we don't want to see it, just because there's a lot of liability when it comes to that, especially under an HOA.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Please don't be offended. First off, right out of the gate, this is an unbelievable vision, unbelievable vision. You know, for the last 4 years, 5 years, what's happening with the golf course? What's happening? If you ask any 5 people in town, everyone knows what's happening. All 5 people have got 5 different ideas. I've been told myself what's going to happen, and tonight's the first time I've seen this. So congratulations on this vision. This is really, really, formerly my career, brilliant effort. And you haven't even started. I would like to begin in the northwest corner. The original 14 units, that is not part of this contract zone, is that correct? Because we've already settled that. You're good to go on that. That is excluded from this contract zone. It's everything else, the radius on the north side of McClellan and everything on the south side.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned 64 residential units, and again, don't get upset with me. Every single one of these little yellow blocks represents a single-family residence, is that correct, the idea?
A lot, yep.
So I have 65. And I'm going back to Mr. Frank, because we had a project not too long ago where we were nitpicking the numbers. And don't get, you know, I know it's preliminary, but I see 65. I see 48 on the south side, and the remaining on the north side. And we were talking about perhaps developing the south side, those 48 units, or selling those single-family homes, if I get that correct.
Yep.
I'm looking to the planning department. We have this words, the language here. What impact does that have on this sketch?
It will direct the master plan. So if you look at the language, 8% is the number of single-family
Correct.
houses.
I understand that. Thank you. But
So that will govern what the master plan can do. So when he comes forward with the other residential units, say for instance, he reduces how many multifamilies and how many other units he has there, that will reduce how many single-family houses he gets to make sure he's under 8. Now, if he goes the other way and when it increases and gets it permitted, it goes the opposite way. So 8% is really the target that we're looking at as a contract zone, not the master plan is a good representation. I think Dan Riley can say, this is right sizing for this parcel, and they did through his presentation how he got there. So do I see it being drastically different? No, but 8% is really what you want to focus on.
All right, thank you. And I see that number is actually written in this contract zone. I think, speaking for myself, I'm buying into this layout, this design, this scheme with this language. And what I'm concerned about is that we get something back and it doesn't look anything like this. It meets all the criteria that's written in this language here, but that's just my own personal opinion. Don't even lose any sleep over it. Regarding the roads and the loops, having served on the council before, I am well aware that dead ends are frowned upon. I can see how the council might decide to take that loop all the way around, but Mr. Deering, Mr. Deering is going to have some influence on that. Maybe Mr. Norton would help support that. So I see these side dead ends, which you can't get around them. I mean, you're going to have them. Those may end up being private roads. And I just see a huge mix of, and I'm looking at the apartments and the garages in the orange. So we as you come around the bottom loop there, then you have several different streets or paths or something. I can see that has to be worked out, because if the loop is going to be a public road, I'm not saying it is, but if it is, then you have all these little side roads, plowing and all the other things, something the HOA, I guess, is going to have to worry about. Is that a true statement?
Correct? True.
Yep, thank you. So do we want to go through this language, line by line, item by item? We have several motions here.
So
I'm not trying to steal anyone's thunder.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for staff, what's important for staff is, before you is the contract zone language. And really, it identifies additional performance standards that are associated with the contract zone. If the planning board has any additional performance standards it would like to entertain as part of the contract zone language, it would be important for us to have, because as I identified earlier, town staff has to take the planning board's version and get it to a workshop with the council just to show them your language for the public hearing. So if you have any tweaks that you would like to add to it, it would be helpful for us to get that tonight if you had them.
I'm going to speak for myself. So I'd like to throw some things in here, but I don't know if it's appropriate. You know, we talked about open space. We want to dedicate a percentage, perhaps. You know, I don't want to take away from the enthusiasm and energy of this project by saying, I want some parks, I want some space built into this project, I wanted something dedicated.
I think we could put a provision on number 4 that just says that open space to be developed as part of the master plan, the town has right of first refusal for the dedication of open space. Something to that effect, where the town gets to dictate whether, when we're going through the master plan process, if there's a piece of open space that the town would like to have, we have the right of first refusal. I think adding that language is fine if we can draft
I think
that.
to Mr. Triano's point, you know, we want this to be residential in scope with some clean businesses, if that's an appropriate term. I don't want to get in trouble. There's a project going over in Scarborough. I don't know if you had a chance to drive through that. It is magnificent. We have friends that live over there. They're doing something similar, or perhaps you're doing something similar to what is being done over there. I don't know who's leading the show or running the show over there. It is unbelievable. They have every kind of mixed use. So, not to be a copycat, I don't know what we can put in to be unique to Gorham, because I want it to be Gorham, but there are things in features I see over there that, wow, you know, could be improved. There are markers over there, if you've driven around it, that represent the old racetrack in where it's 3/4 of furlong. Maybe the streets can be named after the golf course. I don't know. I don't know. I'm rambling on here.
I think that could all be worked in the master plan process. I don't think that needs to be in the contract zone language, but I think the open space is a good one to add that.
Other members, I've had my piece, said my piece.
I like the idea of first refusal. I mean, I know that there are zoning requirements for open space that we'll revisit during the master plan review, but the first refusal, I think, is a great recommendation.
I just want to say, I like the concept a lot. I think you've done a lot with the terrain and the land, even though it doesn't follow the zoning guidelines exactly. You've interpreted them and made the best of the site. Ms. Nichols' comment about the houses having a zoning or design guidelines, I favor that. I would encourage that. And then the question that I had was the community spaces. What are the programs for each of those, including the open space next to the community space on McClellan?
So overall, what we're looking at is there's plenty of open space here. What we're really focused on is trails, people being able to park their car. There's actually a community parking lot already set up right here, which is just obviously in a master plan for off-site people being able to park and come, whether it's out-of-town people, out-of-city people, whatever it may be, and be able to come and join the environment. The other thing is, too, it allows people that are coming to this area and creating businesses to have business customers come from out of town. So, but what we're really focused on is there's 2 community clubhouses. So the 2 community clubhouses will have pools, gym memberships, or gym memberships. They're essentially, people can walk in and use the gyms. Like I said, there'll be pools. There'll be quiet areas for people to go on their laptops, computers, work areas. So the apartment people can actually leave their apartment and have a second spot to work if they don't want to go to an extra bedroom in their units or something like that. Above and beyond that, there is, you know, a lot of open space here. I think in terms of development, there's probably more open space here than there would be if we were to follow the performance standard. Right now, there's a lot more open space, a lot more trails. If we were to follow the performance standard the entire way, like up here, there'd be very little trails and there'd be very little more parking, more pavement. So I guess what I'm trying to say, focused on everything that we've all talked about, is less trees getting cut, more land left the way it was, not disturbed. Trails for the community, pools, gyms, all that type of stuff. And that's just in terms of open space sledding areas, maybe not during construction, but overall long-term, and some stuff like that. So that's really what we're looking for in the forefront.
Thanks.
Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, and as we're speaking about performance standards, you know, I start thinking about the impact of, you know, we've talked about the site, but we haven't talked about the impact on McClellan. We haven't talked about the impact of traffic. We haven't talked about the impact on other roads feeding this. So how does that factor into, is there a place for that in the contract zone?
Not because they're not asking for any reduction in any performance standards. So they're gonna, when they come forward with traffic for the site and the development, they have to meet all the performance standards. So they're not asking for any relief from performance standards regarding traffic. So there's no need to add a provision to the contract zone identifying that they need to meet it. They already have to meet it, and they're going to be required to meet it.
So just so I understand this, if, you know, once built out, obviously there's going to be a greater impact on McClellan. If McClellan needs to be rebuilt to handle the additional traffic, if the intersections with the adjoining streets need to be, have lights added, other signage, turning lanes, et cetera, that will all come under those performance standards?
Correct. They'll be reviewed by us as well as the DOT. My guess is this will be a traffic movement permit, so the DOT will weigh in on traffic movement throughout the site and off-site as well, so.
So is there anything that needs to be put into the contract zone that the developer would be liable for any off-site improvements for the additional traffic?
No, because they're already required to meet them.
They are, okay. I just want to make sure that's really clear, because I can just see, I mean, it's obvious. You can't throw this many homes in and this many, this type of population growth without an impact on the streets and traffic.
My own editorial, if you're on Brackett and you're heading south, if you are not at McClellan by 7:15, you will be waiting in traffic to get to Saco Street. And that's a complete line of traffic.
Yep.
So a word to the wise, I'm going to tell you, traffic is going to be a monster. I would try and already account for widening the road much wider, slip lanes, et cetera, et cetera. If we're having approximately 824 residences, let's round it down to 800. Let's say there's 400 cars. 200 go towards 114, 200 go to Brackett. Just a word to the wise. I would plan on having this road in anticipation of what the performance standards are, be ahead of the curve. It is going to be a monster.
Oh, yeah, the project's going to require a full traffic movement permit through the DOT. That'll outline the whole study area, identify intersections that need to be improved, and evaluate that. That's all part of the process,
Thank you.
regardless of what the use is here. I mean, any project of this scale, regardless whether they're single family or not, it's going to fall under those requirements.
Mr. Frank, please.
Spot on about the traffic. My wife and I live to the west of this, off of McClellan, I forget the name of the development. It's been there about 30 years, 40 years. Anyway, McClellan is already basically an extension of the Gorham bypass. I mean, yeah, the traffic there, yeah, in the morning and in the afternoon, because people are using it to get from, Portland to Standish and whatever. And my wife happens to work at IDEX, so she goes east on McClellan and then tries to make a left onto Brackett. She brings her lunch. No, seriously, but yeah, traffic's already a problem.
Yeah,
Because of the lack of the bypass, that's probably not going to happen. McClellan is the new bypass.
The difficulty on Brackett is you're heading south, the Crown right by the flower shop. And
Sight distance.
if you're traveling exceeding a safe speed, and all of a sudden everyone is coming off McClellan trying to get onto Brackett, that's, I think you got the message. Anyone else? We have a couple of motions, if we want to take a peek.
I guess I'm unclear. I thought we unless we're changing language, and the only language I understand that we might add is on the first refusal on open space. Is that what otherwise we don't have to
Yeah, so
vote on anything, or?
what I would say is you would move to send the proposed contract zone agreement to the next available planning board meeting for a public hearing with the addition of additional performance standards regarding open space, giving the town the right of first refusal. That would be drafted by staff.
With the understanding that it's going to go to the town council before,
Yeah, we'll do that.
so that doesn't have to be a part of the motion.
That doesn't have to be part of the motion. If you just say so moved, then we'll capture.
So moved.
I don't believe he can legally make the motion.
You cannot.
True.
But when we can play it back, we'll have that language.
Yeah, because I wasn't writing it down.
No.
Mr. Chair, I move to send the proposed contract zone agreement to the next available planning board meeting for a public hearing with the amendment with language addressing the town's right of first refusal on open space.
Is that pretty close, Mr. Poirier?
Perfect.
Thank you, Colonel. Is there a second, Mr.
Second.
Walsh? Are we all of understanding what's happening here?
Yes.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Good project.
How's everyone doing? Do we need to take 5 minutes? We're going to take a 2-minute break, please. 2-minute break. Thank you. Evening again, ladies and gentlemen. It is January 6, 2025. This is our regular meeting of the Gorham Planning Board. We just had a brief recess. We're looking now at item 2, discussion preliminary subdivision and private way. Nicole and Jarell Regis, I apologize. Wood Road subdivision and private way, a request for preliminary subdivision and private way extension reviews off Wood Road, Zone Rural R. Map 54, Lot 9-3. The applicant is represented by Peter Delfonso, PE of Delfonso Engineering. Would staff like to kick this off, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So, as the board may recall, this is a 5-lot subdivision in the rural zone. It is proposed to be served by a 975-foot private way. It's the third time the proposal is before the board. Originally it was in for sketch plan review back in November of 2022. It was before the board for preliminary subdivision review in October of 2024, and the board conducted a site walk in October of 2024 as well. The applicant has revised their proposal to looking to address some of the concerns and comments and that were brought up to meet the ordinances. There's a number of items of note that have been flagged through staff and peer review in order to address some of the requirements in the ordinances. So one thing to note that the private way has been constructed prior to approvals as a driveway, and so what they're looking to do is get that driveway approved as a private way. So it's important to note if approved, the whatever is built will need to match what is in the approved plans by the planning board. Lot 4 under the revised plan, they've moved the right-of-way reserve that connects south through the parcel. So as a result of doing that, Lot 4 no longer has 200 feet of road frontage, which is what's required in the zone. The applicant submitted Class B soil survey. Class A survey is required and cannot be waived in this zone unless public water is being supplied, and that's not proposed by the applicant. They're proposing to use private wells. The applicant has requested evaluated wetland impacts, and they have shown 3,500 square feet of impacts, which is below 4,300 square feet permit threshold. We are still looking for homeowners association documents that meet the requirements of the town. We're looking for a nitrate plume analysis showing capacity for wastewater disposal. Culverts in the driveway have been assessed and upgrades are proposed where they're warranted. It should be additional review of culverts is indicated. The applicant proposes 12-inch driveway culverts. They're required to be 15 inches. Additionally, the board may want to ask the applicant how the proposed private way will impact stormwater runoff to abutters, as has been brought up in a letter that's been distributed to the board, and a abutter to the project has indicated that there may be wetland impacts from the driveway stormwater impacts from the driveway that's already been constructed. And there are additional staff and peer review comments that need to be addressed that are found in the memo. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Mr. Delfonso, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I'm Peter Delfonso. I'm a civil engineer. What I'd like to do is to jump right into the memo that the staff sent out and hit the highlights of items that there are questions on or that we may owe some more information on, rather than, I think Damon covered what the project is pretty well, so I don't need to add to that. So, on page 2 of the memo there, the general items that we just heard. We understand that we are going to have to prove that the roadway that's there today, the driveway, has,
1 second. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, literally. Are we all looking at this document? When he's saying page 2, this is the same page 2 that we're all looking at?
of the staff memo that went out.
There's 24 pages in total.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Thank you.
Okay. Anyway, what was built there was a driveway that was approved by the town as a driveway. We understand that it was not approved as a private way. That will be inspected by me by doing test bits and checking the grades and the widths and the material, testing the material to confirm that the materials and what's there meets the town ordinance. We did do some preliminary test bits, and that's what we were doing a week or so ago, and we were asked to well, we did some test bits, and then Jarrell decided that he wanted to keep going and fix a couple of the items that I commented on. But anyway, we did do test bits, and the area of the roadway has been grubbed, and there is a layer of granular material up to subgrade, and then there's a layer of sub-base gravel on top of that. It needs some more sub-base gravel, and it needs the surface gravel before it meets the total depth of the town's requirement, and it also needs to be graded. And all the side slopes, built to meet the roadway section. That part has not been done yet. The Lot 4. Lot 4 actually has 542 feet of road frontage because it backs into Daisy Lane. But we will adjust the lot lines to give it the 200 feet of frontage on our new roadway, unless the town staff agrees with me that we can count Daisy Lane. I haven't asked that question yet. It just dawned on me today with respect to the soil survey, I have asked the soil scientist to upgrade his soil survey to meet the standards for Class A. Jarrell tells me that the HOA agreement is in process, and we should have that within a week or so. We have contracted with Mark Sensi to do a nitrate study. So he'll be doing that right away. So I'm still on the first page here, or page 2, not the first page. The culverts will be upgraded. The ones that are 12-inch will be changed to 15-inch. And I think I hit the items on that page. And then I'm going to jump a ways here, so bear with me. Moving to page 6, I think we've covered all the fire department's comments from the first submittal with the follow-up submittal, so I don't have any additional comments on that. On page 7, underwater supply and wastewater disposal, there's a question or a comment on lots 4 and 5 that the septic system locations are on the other side of the wetland, and we realize that. We are in the process of getting test bits done and to prepare the HHE 200 forms. Any crossing of that wetland for infrastructure will be done by boring underneath it. There's not going to be any open excavation in that area. We just talked about, I just commented on the nitrate study that's in process. And then going down to the roads there. I think we've covered all of those items. Moving on to page 8. We talked about the driveway being evaluated. There's this comment from Public Works, I guess. I'm not sure. I'll have to contact Terry and see what his comment on the culvert sizing means, or unless the town engineer wants to jump in if he knows what that comment is about. It's one.
Mr.
He
Norton?
says, I'm not still sure that,
Sorry, excuse me, we're on page 8 of 24?
yeah, page 8.
We can find out what that comment specifically referred to, but I do believe it was the driveway culverts being
Okay.
Undersized. But there was also some discussion about that culvert at the beginning of the road, I believe. The last meeting that we had, I believe Terry was there, and we discussed that. I think you addressed it with your 15-inch, going to a 15-inch.
Right, and then I put in 15-inch, 12-inch driveway culverts after I told him what the spec was, so we all. He talks about the access management, but I thought we covered that. Well, you did. And said that we were okay at the site walk.
So it wasn't at the sidewalk. What we had discussed was.
Oh, was it at the meeting?
That meeting, yeah, we discussed the fact that the Wood Road, I believe it's 35 miles an hour in that section. And off the top of my head, I don't know what the standard says for entrance spacing on that road. But you would be removing an existing entrance that connects to Wood Road for this project, which would reduce it would keep the amount of entrances along Wood Road consistent. It may not fully achieve the standard distance spacing between entrances, but it would maximize that spacing based on the context of the road. So it's not making it any worse. That's the point.
The town attorney did have a comment down at the bottom of page 8 about the out parcel. And we have included it on the subdivision plan to cover the requirements for that, because it was sold in the last 5 years. I'm going to jump ahead now to page 11, some comments from Wright Pierce. Again, a lot of these are duplicates. They commented on the soil survey and that will be upgraded once the nitrate study is, they made a comment on potable water, and they want to see well locations on the plan. So once the nitrate study is done, then we can pick locations for the wells based on where the nitrate plume is headed and where the septic system is. And they commented on Lot 4, which is shown, and then Steve Martin, the project surveyor, will be reviewing the subdivision plan and stamping the subdivision plan. He will add the monuments to it based on town requirements. So they'll be shown on the final plan. And then some minor comments on page 13 from Wright Pierce about silt fence, and those will be added to the plans based on their comment. We need to add the right-of-way location to the detail for the road. They talked about the soil survey too, so we've already covered that. And down at the bottom, they talked about the well location, so there's some duplication there. Then on Lot 14, we covered Lot 4 and the frontage. And those were the comments that we got on phase 2. I mean, on phase 2, on the supplemental submittal. We did receive a copy of the letter from the abutter who owns the out parcel, talking about drainage and all that. I think a lot of the issues that they are commenting on is, I mean, the roadway's not finished. It's not built to the exact dimensions of the standard detail. Once that is done, then a lot of the issues that they're seeing out there or they have seen out there will be taken care of. And then we did do with respect to the amount of water, we did a analysis, the HydroCAD analysis of the site, and we compared the post-development, the proposed post-development runoff to the existing, and they're basically the same. There's not much of any increase. The whole site flows towards the brook, and we did do a check on the total flow coming from the subdivision going towards the brook, and it's essentially the same as the pre-development amount. So with that, that's my comments for right now, and we're here to answer any questions you have that are further. We are hoping to get preliminary approval so that we can get a submittal in for final approval. And I'm here to answer questions. Hopefully I have them.
Thank you. Members of the board?
I can see you.
Yes, please, Ms. Nichols.
So there's a lot of pages here. And there
Yeah.
are some things that have been, brought up as a note, and then something's happened with it, and then it's come back, and so they're in here multiple times.
Yeah.
One of them being, so I just want to make sure I understand a couple things.
Okay.
One of them is the soil survey. So that is not a Class A soil survey. It
It's a-
has not yet been done.
The soil survey that was done, it was a high-intensity soil survey. And when the soil scientist reported it, he reported it as a Class B soil survey. He didn't check the ordinance, I guess, and I missed it, that it said Class B on the soil survey. He's telling me that he has the information he needs based on the work that he did out there to upgrade the,
Okay, so the soil survey has been done. It was
It's been
just
done.
improperly kind of marked on that first
right,
one.
it was presented wrong in the,
But it still needs to be stamped.
Right.
And it needs to show the test pits.
the test pits will be on
So
there.
it
They're in
looks like that's
process right
been-
now.
Okay, looks like that's been asked for a couple of times.
Yeah.
And then there's a question, justification that the proposed septic systems
Ms.
will...
Nichols, what page, please, are you referring
Oh,
to?
I'm sorry, on page 13.
Thank you.
I apologize. On page 13, under subdivision, number 2, it's recommended that the applicant provide justification that the proposed septic systems will not result in undue pollution of surface or ground waters, either on or off the site. So the response was that the lots are sized according to the ordinance and the septic designs will comply with plumbing code. And so I guess my question, and I'm not really sure if it's for the applicant or for town, or maybe both, is that why are we asking that question? Is there something unusual about the applicant's proposed septic systems that made us ask that question? Because the response sounds like, of course it's going to be covered because it's going to follow the code. And so I'm just not sure if that actually answered the question.
If I can interpret this, Wright Pierce's comment is, it is recommended that the applicant provide a justification that the proposed septic systems will not result in undue pollution. And I think that's a valid statement. So they had no further comment because they stand by that expectation. And that detail has not been actually created yet. I look at planning department, please.
Certainly. In this case, to prove that the undue pollution standard is met, is we have the developers do a nitrate plume analysis. And that's mentioned in another section,
Okay.
not specifically in this one, but that's what that gets at. So,
Okay.
so you're not cross-contaminating things.
Okay, so the concern wasn't really addressed because it's in that comment, but it goes back to the nitrate plume survey that needs to be done. That has been done.
It's in process.
It's in the process of being done. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, gosh, I have a lot of questions. On page 14, on number 5, so we were talking about the road frontage of Lot 4. So now I'm confused. Is Lot 4 road frontage 246 feet or 500 and something feet? Because you used a number of 500 and something. And maybe that has to do with, there was another road or something else you were wondering if they'd count?
See, he's raised to this. This is lot 4, and he's thinking, how about if we include this, and so this is a little bit up here,
Oh.
the back, not the front.
But does that change it from 246 to 500 and something?
If I may. look to address that. So the applicant has revised the plan since the time where, I believe it was 246 feet, by changing the location of the reserved right-of-way. They changed the shape of Lot 4 so that it no longer abutted the end of the hammerhead for the private way, so that reduced the road frontage to 146 feet. The applicant doesn't have any rights to use Daisy Lane as access, as far as we understand, so we could review that, but I would believe that they could not use that as frontage. Carol?
All right, the way I read that, it looked like because they reduced the size of the plan, we weren't able to really calculate the road frontage, and that they clarified the road frontage as being 246 feet, so that that's not an issue anymore by looking at because they had the 24 by 36.
Those dimensions are shown on the plans.
Okay.
So that's how we can determine what's provided.
So it is still an issue.
That's a separate issue
It's
where
a-
the
it's a
plans
new
were
issue.
scaled correctly.
Okay,
Those are two separate issues, basically.
okay.
That comment was based on the September plan, and not the revised plan. When we moved the through right-of-way from coming off the side of the Lanny Lane to the end of the hammerhead. And that's when I lost the 50 feet, and I missed that.
Okay. All right.
So the staff recommendation would be to adjust the lot
Yeah,
lines.
we are
to
going to
get
adjust the lot
frontage
lines.
From the Lonnie Lane, not Daisy Lane.
Okay, so there's a doable fix to that one.
Well, the getting access off of Daisy Lane is doable, but very expensive and a longer process too, because it would have to be upgraded to meet the town standard, because we would end up with 7 lots and not 2 to 6, so,
Right, which you're limited to 6.
yeah. Well, that roadway would end up with 6. We're limited to 6 on our road, but that roadway is already right there, so that's one of the reasons we didn't go that way.
And one last question or comment. So this letter that we received from the abutter, again, I didn't see that till tonight when we first came in. We just it came in a little bit late. So it looks to me that I guess I just want the abutters to realize that it's not that we're not looking at that at all, but that with the changes in the culvert sizes and crowning of the road, that apparently it's not all quite where it needs to be, and the buffering on the sides may take care of that issue? I mean,
It would definitely
to
take care of
connect those
the
two.
first issue that they note on their plan, because the roadway isn't finished, up in that area, because the water coming from, what happens out there is, the town has a drain right here that picks up water from Wood Road, and it comes across, and it used to dump right where the road is, where the driveway is. And when they built the driveway, they extended the culvert, so it ends up going directly right at their property line, where the water went there before. It came across here and then down. That's what the contours show. So,
and there was some comment about where the road was a little bit flat, where it really needed more crowning.
Right.
Is that potentially down in that area, that beginning area
I
where
don't
right
think
now
so.
we're
I
having
I'm not sure what they were. I think it was down the
While
end.
others ask questions.
I think it was down at the end of the road that they were referring to. But
All right, I'll look for that. Thank you.
Anyone else? I had seen text in here someplace, and I've gone through this, and I'm dumbfounded I cannot find it, but I do see that there was mention that Lot 6 has to be numbered or named, and I can't for the life of me figure out where Lot 6 would be on this drawing C-100, or am I dreaming?
well, I don't know if we number it Lot 6 or what. We can do whatever you want, but we don't own that property. That's the out parcel, which is here. This is their house and their driveway. Comes down to the house down in there. The reason it's on there is because the previous owner of the whole parcel sold it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, something like that. And it's a 5-year, anything that was sold within the last 5 years has to be on this subdivision plan.
Okay, is that,
That's state law.
That meets the state subdivision requirement.
so it should say Lot 6 where we say the out parcel?
Labeling out parcel meets the requirement.
Labeling, okay, thank you.
It meets the requirement as presented.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, any other questions? I'd like to refer back to our notes, starting on page 17. There's a lot of highlighted information. It's still not 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. In fact, on 23. A lot of information that's still outstanding. It gives me a little bit of distress. That's my opinion. I'd like to hear from each of you. Yes, Mr. Frank.
I wouldn't say I'm distressed, but I'm definitely not at ease with what I'm looking at here.
Touche.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I have similar feelings. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on this. There was, honestly, I don't know why it's here tonight. I think the work was laid out in earlier documentation, and I honestly think the applicant is wasting this board's time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Thank you, Mr. Frank. I recall my distress, and I'm not at ease. How's that? There's too much yellow for me to feel comfortable. It seems we're here tonight and we're agreeing that all of these things need to be done, but they haven't been done yet, and they're in the process, and they are in the pipeline, and perhaps they'll be ready in a week or two, and perhaps this would have been better with all the Ts crossed, all the Is dotted, come back to us so that we can give our due diligence. Planning department can do their thing, and we'll be set to go, but I think my opinion is we're not quite there yet, but I would like to hear from others.
Just a question for the town. What's the standard for preliminary subdivision approval? Because that's what we're talking about, is preliminary approval, right? Not final approval. And I understand some work was already been started, and that's part of what is causing some of the hesitation, because work was started that normally wouldn't have been started without preliminary approval. So, where am I off, or what's the read of what's the purpose of the preliminary subdivision approval, and what are the normal standards that we would expect?
In general, pages 16, 17, 18, 19, you will be able to find that they met all of those standards for preliminary approval.
And they have not.
And in this case, they have not.
So the expectation would be those would be met prior to preliminary plan approval?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any thoughts? Mr. Walsh?
Would you care for a motion?
Well, no pressure, I'm just,
Can I ask a question?
yes, please.
I didn't quite catch what Carol said, so what she was saying, because from the way I read all this, some of this yellow that's here is just, I'm not sure why it's there, especially like there was something about scenic and historic and all that, and we've taken care of that with contact with the Maine Historic Preservation. As far as I read the issues here, we've got two issues. One of them is that soil survey that needs to be noted that it's a Class A survey, and we're missing the nitrate study. Those are the two real issues. We do have to adjust a couple of lot lines, but
So on page 17, paragraph C, they are, we're waiting on the submission that shows information about the wastewater disposal. On page 18, E, we're waiting on the on-site septic information and the nitrate plume analysis for that section.
Yep.
In G, we are waiting on the Class A soil survey for that section. In I, this actually might be one that they have met, unless Damon can give me a little more.
Yeah, my understanding
Information.
was that that information had been requested, and if there's a letter from Historic Preservation that states that there is no concern on the parcel.
all you get, if there are no issues, all you get back from the state now is a stamp on the letter that you sent them saying that they looked at it. That's what you
Can you provide
got.
us with the letter so that we have that?
I thought I did.
When you submit it next, the bits of information, if you would.
That's a relatively minor issue. We can follow up on that one.
True.
So we could accept letter I with this, with
As
this
a
letter?
condition of
Sure,
approval.
sure,
that
sure, sure, yep,
To be done.
sure.
Although presumably that will be addressed before final approval, but the other items are certainly outstanding.
And in this case, you're
Yes, the,
also approving a private way, and there's a standard on page 21, number 3. That standard requires homeowners association documents.
Yeah, so the homeowners association documents, the
Oh, yeah, there's a whole,
private way adjustment, would the private way normally have to be completed before preliminary subdivision approval? Because there's questions about the culvert and the grading that you talked about earlier.
It can be concurrent, you can do them at the same time, but it has its own standards.
Right. So that could be a condition of approval, final approval?
That one could be.
Could be, okay. So it's soil survey, nitrate, plume analysis, and homeowners association documents.
Class A survey.
A letter from the Historic Society.
that's in the last submittal. The December 6th submittal, the full document. It's 100 pages, but it's in there.
Which document?
It's submittal, supplemental submittal that was sent in on December 6th. It's item 10. So you have to flip through the pages to get it, but it's there. It's just in front of the, you know, it's right after the Class B soil survey and the head of the technical and financial narrative. That's it. Not that. But
Anyone from the board, any other comments, concerns? Ms. Nichols, please.
So
Right to the microphone.
there's some tweaking to your lot lines.
yes,
So approving preliminary, is that fall in line with doing a preliminary approval even though the lot lines are not finalized?
Traditionally, historically, the planning board has not given preliminary approval with so many outstanding things, including lot lines.
May I ask another? And I apologize, it's in here somewhere. There was a recommendation of having iron, well, the monuments, I think is where it's termed, and having an iron rods to designate where the the lot lines are.
Right.
And then also designation where the septic is and where the water, the well.
right, the septic locations are noted on there, the water is not.
Okay, and that's what we're waiting for,
We're
that all
waiting
of
for
those
the
information to finish.
the nitrate study so that we don't put wells where the plume is going. So,
We have enough information, folks, to make a decision here, or? Mr. Frank, please.
Just going to quote my handwritten note here for my own consideration. The question I'm thinking, are the remaining outstanding issues numerous enough and serious enough to require the applicant to make another presentation to the planning board, or can/should we grant approval based on and accompanied by a long list of conditions of approval? That's a rhetorical question that I asked of all of us, I think.
It's very good. Thank you for stating that. If I use history, we have had other projects come before us with less issues and not approved. Some of you have served much longer than me and know that you may have approved other projects that had as much. My opinion is, I think all of these things that are outstanding were known to be outstanding since our site walk. And with the holidays, et cetera, I'm still waiting. We knew a Class A survey was required. Somehow a Class B got done. We've had that before. That's a slap on the hand. You know it's supposed to be Class A. Anything else shouldn't even be considered. So there's some communication gaps there, perhaps. It's the majority of the board will make the decision. Yes, Mr. Walsh, please.
I think you said it very well. Most of these items were known before, so that's why I'm questioning why we're hearing it again. And honestly, I come back to, this ties up staff time. The applicant had a list of what they needed to bring to the staff and bring to the planning board, and that was pretty clear. I don't believe that, Carol has stated that we have typically not approved something with this many outstanding items, and I think we need to hold to our standards.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. And with that, are you looking at one of the motions?
I am.
Please.
I move to postpone further review of the Wood Road subdivision request for preliminary subdivision approval pending responses to remaining issues.
I second that.
I believe we also need to have some finalization, right, on those revisions?
Amend that motion, just to complete this, because to move to postpone further review of the Wood Road subdivision request for preliminary approval pending responses to remaining issues and finalizing revisions to the plan.
Bingo. Mr. Burrows, you still?
That's better. I second that motion.
All right, folks, any other discussion on this? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. I hope to see you again and have all these things squared away.
Hey, can I just ask one question?
Of course.
Can you get preliminary approval and final approval in the same meeting? Or is it going to take two?
I'm going to look to my right and say not likely.
Well, that is an actual possibility. The board can choose to waive having them in separate meetings. And then if everything is submitted and you are perfectly fine with what has been submitted and it passes muster, then you may waive that requirement.
So the burden's on you. It looks like we could do this. Let's see you,
Okay. Well, thank you for your time, and I apologize for not having
apologies.
everything there that you needed.
no apologies. There's a lot of work here. We appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, any other, excuse me, any other business to come before us?
Just one quick update, if I may. The economic development strategic plan is moving forward. I'm representing the planning board. The consultant has come back with some really interesting data analysis, and I don't think we've seen it in writing. It's been presented to the committee, but when that does become go out to a broader audience, I think you'll find it quite interesting. So more to come.
Great, great, thank you. Anyone else?
I will add the Open Space Planning Committee is due to meet in 2 weeks. I think it's on the 15th.
Whatever it says on my phone.
So that's a kickoff to that planning, open space and trails
Yes.
plan.
January 15th, to be exact.
There you got it. Of course, it's an open meeting if you want to sit in. And then we are also starting conversation about a recreation plan. So that's sort of in the works. After we get a little further along with these other things, so we have enough time to work on it, but that's in the works.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Ms. Nichols?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Great words. Anyone second?
Second?
Mr. Walsh, a second. Any other reason to stay out tonight? All those in favor? Thank you. Have a great evening.
And Happy New Year.